Vincent Marlowe didn't plan to stop at the elementary school that morning. He didn't even have a reason that made sense on paper. He was just driving a different route, hands steady on the wheel, mind doing what it always did, counting risks, reading faces in memory, replaying conversations for hidden knives, the kind of thinking that had kept him alive long enough to become the man people lowered their voices around. But the second he passed the chain-link fence and heard that laughter, sharp, cruel, and packed with the kind of joy that only exists when someone else is being crushed, his foot hit the brake before he told himself to. He stepped out into the cold air, and the sounds hit him clearer. Children shouting, sneakers squeaking on blacktop, a whistle somewhere, and then a man's voice. Too loud, too pleased with itself. "Come on," the voice called. "Show us how you catch with one hand." "Oh, right. You can't." Vincent's jaw tightened so hard it ached. He didn't know the teacher, he didn't know the school, he didn't know the girl, but his body recognized humiliation the way a scar recognizes weather. He walked to the fence as if pulled. In the center of the schoolyard, a small group had formed a loose circle. Kids were half giggling, half staring, unsure if they were allowed to feel bad yet. And in front of them stood a girl who couldn't have been more than 9. Tiny shoulders in a pale hoodie, backpack straps hanging. Her hair pulled back tight like someone had tried to make her look neat enough to be safe. Her right sleeve was pinned up cleanly. No messy fray, no attempt to hide it with a bulky jacket. Just the quiet fact of who she was. The teacher, mid-40s, red face, a whistle on a lanyard, held a rubber ball in his hands like it was a prop in a cheap show. He tossed it lightly from palm to palm, smirking at her. "Don't be so sensitive," he said, loud enough for the laughter to keep rolling. "It's a joke, you kids need to toughen up." The girl didn't cry. That was what hit Vincent hardest. Not tears, not an outburst, just a stillness so controlled it looked older than her age. Her eyes weren't wide, they were tired. Like she'd already learned that if you begged people to stop, they found it funnier. Vincent watched her swallow, watched her chin lift a fraction, watched her hold her ground with one arm and a heart that was trying not to crack in front of everyone. Something in Vincent's chest shifted. It wasn't anger first. Anger was easy. Anger was familiar. This was something uglier because it was quieter, like shame, like memory, like the sensation of being trapped in the wrong place at the wrong time, with no one coming to help. He heard his own voice in his head from decades ago, begging a stepfather to stop. He heard the laughter of boys who'd known exactly where to aim their words. He'd grown up learning that pain was currency, that if you wanted safety, you bought it with violence, that if you wanted respect, you took it. And now in a schoolyard he watched a grown man buying applause by spending a child. Vincent didn't open the gate, not yet. He didn't storm in and grab the teacher. That would have been the old Vincent, the one who ended problems with his hands and left nothing behind but silence and fear. The Vincent people told stories about. But he was not that man anymore. At least, he tried not to be. He stayed at the fence, eyes fixed on the teacher, making himself breathe. He could feel the weight of his own reputation like a gun tucked into his waistband, even though he hadn't brought one. In his world, fear was a language. In this world, fear was a crime. The teacher tossed the ball toward the girl's chest without warning. It bounced off her hoodie and dropped to the ground. A couple kids laughed louder. The teacher laughed with them, a short bark. "Oops," he said, shrugging. "Guess you're not built for this." The girl bent down with her one hand to pick up the ball. It took her longer. The teacher watched like it was part of the entertainment. When she stood up again, she held the ball to her chest, knuckles white. Her eyes flicked to the fence for the briefest moment, and for a second Vincent thought she'd seen him, thought she'd felt that someone, somewhere, didn't think this was funny. Then she looked away again, because hope was dangerous. Vincent turned and walked back to his car before he did something that couldn't be undone. But before we continue, I want to make a very special invitation. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps me see that you support me and are enjoying my stories, and comment below which city you're watching us from. Now, let's continue. He sat behind the wheel with both hands resting on it, staring straight ahead. The inside of the car smelled faintly of leather and cold air, the kind of calm that made people think he didn't feel anything. That was his gift. That was his curse. He could sit in a room full of men planning terrible things and look bored. He could watch betrayal unfold and keep his pulse steady. But a schoolyard did something to him. Vincent picked up his phone and made a call without looking at the screen. 1 ring, 2. "Yeah," said a voice on the other end. Calm, competent, loyal. "Eddie," Vincent said quietly, "I need information." A pause. "On who?" Vincent watched through the windshield as the teacher strolled away from the circle, like he'd just finished a good performance. The girl stood alone now, ball tucked against her chest, shoulders tight, trying to blend back into the background. "The PE teacher at Hawthorne Elementary," Vincent said. "I want his name. I want everything that's ever followed him. I want to know if he's always been like this or if he's been protected." Another pause, shorter. Eddie didn't ask why. In Vincent's world, you didn't ask why, unless you wanted to be told to disappear. "Give me an hour," Eddie said. Vincent hung up and sat still. A part of him whispered that this wasn't his business, that his hands were not clean enough to touch a child's pain, that stepping into this would expose him in ways he couldn't control. But another part, the part he tried to bury under suits and rules and distance, remembered what it was like when no one stepped in. Vincent started the engine and drove away, but the schoolyard stayed in his rearview mirror like a stain. He didn't go back to his office downtown. Instead, he drove to a quiet cafe a few blocks away, one of the places he could sit without anyone trying to impress him. He chose a corner table facing the door out of habit, ordered black coffee, didn't drink it. He watched people come and go and tried to convince himself this was just a moment, a cruelty in 1,000 small cruelties, something the girl would survive, because kids survived things all the time. But he couldn't stop seeing her face. The way she didn't cry like crying had stopped being useful. The way the teacher used joke like a shield. The way the other kids laughed because they were scared not to. Vincent's phone buzzed. "Eddie." Vincent answered immediately. "Talk to me." "You were right to call," Eddie said. "His name is Daniel Rusk, 46. Been at Hawthorne for 7 years. Vincent's fingers tightened around the phone. "Any complaints?" A short, bitter exhale on Eddie's end. "Plenty. Parents complained about bullying, about him teasing kids. Administration smoothed it over. He's got a friend on the school board, old college buddy." Vincent stared at the dark surface of his untouched coffee. "Keep going." "He also has money problems," Eddie said. "Gambling, looks like. A couple of debts he's been dodging, and something else. There was a formal reprimand at a previous school for inappropriate comments. Not criminal, but ugly. They transferred him quietly. No headlines." Vincent felt something cold move through him. Not surprise, confirmation. "So he's been doing this," Vincent said, "and he keeps getting away with it." "Yeah," Eddie said. "People like that always find a place that needs a warm body." Vincent's gaze slid to the cafe window. Outside, a mother held her child's hand crossing the street. The kid hopped over cracks, laughing. A laugh that was clean. Vincent lowered his voice. "Find out who protects him. Names, emails, money trails." "I don't want rumors. I want proof." Eddie hesitated. "Boss, you sure you want to pull on this thread? It's a school. It's a hunting ground," Vincent cut in, still quiet. "And he thinks it's safe." There was silence, and then Eddie's voice turned firm. "Understood." Vincent ended the call and sat there for a long moment, listening to the cafe's soft noise, cups clinking, someone stirring sugar, a low radio playing something forgettable. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. But Vincent had made a decision. Not the kind that ended with sirens or blood. The kind that ended with a man standing alone, finally facing what he'd done in daylight, with nowhere left to hide. Vincent stood, left cash on the table, and walked out into the cold. His breath fogged in front of him. His suit jacket pulled tight across his shoulders as he turned toward his car. He had built his life on consequences. He had taken and taken until fear itself bowed its head when he entered a room. Now he was going to do something different. He was going to take back a child's dignity, and he was going to do it in a way that made sure Daniel Rusk would never laugh at another kid again. Vincent didn't return to the school that same day. He knew better than to rush. Rushing was how mistakes were made, how people got hurt, how intentions turned sloppy. Instead, he spent the afternoon moving through the city like a shadow, letting information settle into place. Names, times, patterns. Daniel Rusk wasn't an anomaly. He was a habit. A man who'd learned where the blind spots were and built a personality that passed just well enough for decent. By evening, Vincent had learned the girl's name, Emily Carter, 9 years old, 3rd grade. She lived 3 blocks from the school in a narrow townhouse squeezed between 2 others that all looked the same from the outside. Vinyl siding, small patch of grass, a swing set in the back that leaned slightly to the left. Her mother worked nights at a medical supply warehouse. Her father had died 4 years earlier in a highway accident. Emily had lost her arm in the same crash. Vincent read the details slowly, like he was afraid reading too fast would make them less real. The report said Emily had been remarkably resilient. Vincent hated that phrase. Adults used it when a child endured something no child should have to. It let them feel proud without feeling responsible. He closed the folder Eddie had left on his desk and leaned back in his chair. The office was quiet, too quiet. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, lights flickering on as dusk settled. From here, Vincent could watch the world without touching it. He'd built this place to be untouchable. Emily lived at street level, with noises, with neighbors who noticed things but didn't intervene, with a schoolyard where laughter turned sharp. Vincent stood, grabbed his coat and left without telling anyone where he was going. He parked down the block from Emily's house and waited. He didn't want to knock on the door. Not yet. That would frighten her mother. A strange man, well-dressed, no explanation. Vincent understood fear. He respected it. So he waited until Emily came outside. She did, just before sunset, carrying a worn soccer ball under her arm. Not to play. Just to sit on the front steps and roll it back and forth with her foot. One sneaker, scuffed at the toe, tapped the ball gently, like she was testing whether it would leave her if she pushed too hard. Vincent watched from the car, engine off, hands resting on his thighs. He didn't move when she looked his way, didn't smile, didn't wave. He just existed there, a man in a parked car, nothing more. After a minute, Emily frowned. She stood, hugged the ball closer, and walked toward him. Vincent felt a flicker of surprise. Not fear, respect. Most adults crossed streets to avoid him. This child walked straight up. She stopped a few feet from the passenger side window and tilted her head. "Are you lost?" Her voice was steady, curious, not scared. Vincent lowered the window slowly. "No," he said. "Just waiting." "For who?" "For the right moment." She studied him the way kids do, unburdened by reputation. She noticed the crease in his jacket, the faint scar near his temple, the way his eyes stayed level with hers instead of looking past her. "You're not from the school," she said. "No." "You saw," she added. Not a question. Vincent nodded once. "I did." Something shifted in her face. Not relief. Caution. She held the ball tighter. "Are you going to tell?" she asked. "Tell who?" "The principal. Or my mom. Or someone." Vincent considered his answer carefully. "I'm going to make sure it stops." Emily looked down at her sleeve, fingers brushing the pinned fabric. They always say that. Vincent felt the words land like a bruise. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I don't say things I can't finish." She glanced back toward her house, then returned her gaze to him. "He says I distract the other kids," she said, "that it's my fault if they laugh." Vincent felt his jaw tighten. "It's not." She shrugged, a small, practiced motion. "It's easier if you don't cry." "I know," Vincent said again. He knew too well. There was a pause, the air between them filled with the sound of distant traffic and a dog barking somewhere down the street. "What's your name?" she asked. "Vincent." She nodded, like that was enough. "I'm Emily." "I know." She didn't react, just accepted it. "You don't look like a dad," she said. Vincent almost smiled. "I'm not." "Good," she said. "Dads leave." The words were said lightly, but Vincent felt them like a punch. He swallowed. "Not all of them." She rolled the ball under her foot again. "Mine didn't mean to." "I know," Vincent said. He knew that too. He'd read the report twice. Emily took a step back. "If you're going to do something," she said, "don't make it worse." Vincent met her eyes. "I won't." She searched his face one last time, then turned and walked back to the steps. Sat, rolled the ball. The conversation was over. Not because she was done, but because she'd said what mattered. Vincent waited until the front door opened, and her mother called her inside. Then he rolled the window up and let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That night, he didn't sleep. He replayed the teacher's voice, Emily's stillness, the way she hadn't asked him to hurt anyone, only to stop the hurting. By morning, Eddie had more information. Bank statements, emails, recorded complaints buried under administrative language. Daniel Rusk wasn't just cruel, he was careless. He thought authority meant immunity. Vincent sat at his desk and began placing calls. Not threats, conversations. The kind that started polite and ended with people realizing they were suddenly very exposed. By afternoon, the school board had received anonymous packets. Parents received copies of their own complaints, time-stamped and organized. The district's legal department received a quiet warning that someone was prepared to speak publicly. Daniel Rusk, unaware of any of it, blew his whistle at recess and smirked like always, until, for the first time, no one laughed. Vincent watched from across the street, sunglasses on, hands in his coat pockets. He saw the teacher's eyes scan the yard, searching for his audience. He saw confusion replace confidence. Emily stood near the fence, ball tucked under her arm. She looked toward Vincent, not directly but close enough, and this time she didn't look away. Vincent understood something Daniel Rusk didn't. Fear worked best when it arrived quietly, when it didn't announce itself with shouting or fists, but with uncertainty, with the sense that the floor beneath you had shifted and you didn't know who moved it. The first crack appeared the next morning. Daniel arrived at school expecting the same routine, coffee gone lukewarm, whistle around his neck, the dull satisfaction of being in control of a space where no one challenged him. But the front office secretary didn't smile when he walked in. She avoided his eyes. The principal's door, usually closed, stood open. "Daniel," the principal called out, "can you come in for a moment?" Daniel frowned, irritation already prickling his skin. "I've got recess duty in 5. This won't take long." Vincent wasn't in the room, but he might as well have been. His presence existed now in the pauses between words, in the careful tone administrators used when they suddenly remembered liability. Daniel sat, crossed his arms, smirked faintly. The principal cleared his throat. "We've received concerns." "From who?" Daniel asked. "Parents complain all the time." "Yes," the principal said, "but these are detailed." Vincent had made sure of that. Dates, witnesses, patterns, not emotion, evidence. Daniel leaned back, unconcerned. "I joke, kids joke. That's my style." The principal didn't nod this time. "Some students feel targeted." Daniel laughed. "Sensitive kids feel everything." Across the city, Vincent listened to Eddie relay the conversation through a secure line. He closed his eyes, picturing the teacher's confidence as a structure with rotten beams. "Anything else?" Daniel asked. The principal hesitated. "We're placing you under observation for the time being." That word landed differently. Observation, not punishment, not accusation. A spotlight without a verdict. Daniel's smile thinned. "You're kidding." "I'm not." Daniel stood, chair scraping back. "This is ridiculous. It's procedure." Daniel left the office tight-lipped, jaw clenched. He blew his whistle harder than necessary at recess, yelled more, tried to reclaim control with volume. But something had changed. Kids watched him now. Teachers watched him. Phones appeared where they hadn't before. Parents lingered at the fence. Daniel noticed. By lunchtime he was sweating. Vincent spent the day moving pieces, not people. He didn't speak to Daniel. He didn't threaten him. He let the man feel watched by the world he thought he owned. In the afternoon, Vincent visited a quiet office building near the courthouse. He wore no suit jacket, just a pressed shirt and calm expression. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Vincent said. "I'd like to speak to someone about workplace misconduct." An hour later, a formal inquiry began its silent crawl through paperwork and policy. Vincent didn't push. He nudged. That evening, Daniel stopped at a bar near his apartment. He needed noise, familiar faces, something to drown the sense that his reflection no longer obeyed him. 2 beers in, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He answered. "What?" A man's voice, neutral. "Daniel Rusk? Who is this?" "A concerned party." Daniel scoffed. "Real specific. You teach physical education," the voice continued. "You like jokes. You especially like jokes that hurt." Daniel's spine stiffened. "You threatening me?" "No," the voice said. "I'm informing you." "Of what?" "That everything you've laughed off is being counted." Daniel slammed his beer down. "Listen, buddy." The line went dead. Daniel stared at the phone, pulse quickening. He scanned the bar. No one paid him any attention. That made it worse. At school the next day, Emily walked through the gates with her head high. Not defiant, just present. Daniel saw her immediately. Something hot flared in his chest. This was her fault. The quiet ones were always dangerous. They made you look at yourself. He approached her near the equipment shed, lowered his voice. "You been talking?" he asked. Emily looked at him. "Talking is allowed." He leaned closer. "Careful." She met his eyes. "You should be." Daniel recoiled like he'd been slapped. He straightened quickly as another teacher passed by. Vincent watched the exchange from his car across the street. He didn't like that Daniel had approached her again. It tightened something inside him. He picked up his phone. "Accelerate," he said to Eddie. That afternoon, a parent meeting was scheduled. Then another. Then another. Complaints that had once been isolated now formed a chorus. By Friday, Daniel's name circulated in whispers. By Monday, it was spoken aloud. Daniel began to unravel. He snapped at colleagues, missed paperwork deadlines, sent an email he shouldn't have, blaming overly emotional children for misinterpretations. Vincent made sure that email landed in the right inboxes. Still, Daniel wasn't finished. On Tuesday, during recess, he clapped his hands sharply. "All right, listen up." The kids froze. "We're playing dodgeball." A murmur rippled. Daniel's eyes locked onto Emily. "You can keep score." Emily didn't move. "I said, keep score." A teacher across the yard frowned. "Daniel—" "She's not playing anyway," Daniel said loudly. "Might as well be useful." The words hung there, poisonous. Vincent's hand tightened on the steering wheel. For a second, the old instincts surged. Quick, final solutions. He forced himself to breathe. Emily stepped forward. "No," she said. The yard went silent. Daniel stared. "Excuse me." "I said no. You don't get to decide." "Yes," Emily said, voice steady. "I do." Daniel's face flushed. "You're being disrespectful." "I'm being honest." A whistle blew. Not Daniel's. The assistant principal hurried over. "What's going on?" Emily didn't look at Daniel when she spoke. "He keeps telling me what I can't do." The assistant principal looked at Daniel. "We talked about this." Daniel laughed, sharp and brittle. "Unbelievable." "Come with me," the assistant principal said. Daniel threw the ball onto the pavement and stormed off. Vincent felt something loosen in his chest. Not victory. Progress. That night, Vincent sat alone in his office. The city lights flickered below. Eddie stood nearby. "He's panicking," Eddie said. "Called his friend on the board twice today. Left messages." Vincent nodded. "Good. Do you want me to push harder?" Vincent thought of Emily's voice, calm, certain. "No," he said. "Let him finish it himself." Eddie studied him. "You've changed." Vincent didn't deny it. "No," he said. "I've remembered." Outside, the city moved on, unaware that a man was losing the illusion that power meant permission. And for the first time, Daniel Rusk went to sleep afraid, not of violence, but of daylight. Daniel Rusk woke before his alarm, heart already racing. The dream had been the same for 3 nights in a row, standing in a gymnasium with the lights blazing, children's voices echoing without faces, laughter bending into something sharp. He'd try to shout back to explain, but his whistle wouldn't make a sound. He sat up, drenched in sweat, and stared at the ceiling like it might give him permission to breathe. By the time he arrived at school, the building felt different, not hostile, exposed. Teachers spoke in lowered tones when he passed. A custodian paused his sweeping, eyes lingering a second too long. Even the walls seemed to listen. Daniel told himself it was paranoia, that everyone had bad weeks, that this would pass like it always did, but it didn't. Mid-morning, an email landed in his inbox with no subject line. The sender was the district's compliance office. The language was careful and bloodless, the way institutions spoke when they wanted to sound fair while bracing for damage. A review had been initiated. Daniel's fingers trembled as he scrolled. It cited a pattern of conduct. It requested meetings, documentation. His response. He slammed the laptop shut and stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. A few students looked up. Daniel forced a smile and told them to read quietly. His voice sounded wrong to his own ears. Across town, Vincent sat in a quiet conference room with a man who specialized in making facts speak loudly without shouting. Files lay open on the table, complaints that had been dismissed, transfers that had been framed as opportunities, a timeline that told a story no one had wanted to hear. Institutions protect themselves, the man said. People like Rusk slip through because they don't look like monsters. Vincent nodded. Monsters announce themselves. Men like him hide behind rules. The man closed a folder. Once this starts, it won't stop quickly. That's fine, Vincent said. I'm patient. Patience was something Vincent had learned the hard way. You didn't rush consequences. You let them mature. At school, Daniel was called out of class again. This time, the assistant principal didn't bother pretending it was casual. We need you to take the afternoon off, she said. Effective immediately. Daniel laughed too loud. On what grounds? Pending review. Pending what review? He felt the heat rise in his neck. This is ridiculous. Daniel, she said, lowering her voice. Please. He grabbed his bag and stormed down the hallway, aware of eyes on his back. A kid dropped a pencil and jumped when Daniel turned too sharply. Outside, he stood in the parking lot with the sun glaring down, suddenly unsure where to go. He called his friend on the school board again, straight to voicemail. He drove without thinking, ended up near the old high school where he'd once taught, the place he'd been asked to leave quietly. He parked across the street and sat there, hands clenched, memories surfacing like oil. He remembered the first time he'd made a joke and the kids had laughed. The warmth of it, the power. He'd told himself it was harmless. He'd told himself kids needed thick skin. He'd told himself a lot of things. His phone buzzed, unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Yeah? Daniel, a voice said, calm and precise. You've had a long week. Daniel's stomach dropped. Who is this? Someone who's been listening. You think you can mess with my job? Daniel snapped. You don't know who I am. There was a pause, not a threat, a consideration. I know exactly who you are, the voice said. That's the problem. The line went dead. Daniel threw the phone onto the passenger seat and screamed, a raw sound that startled a passerby. He pressed his forehead to the steering wheel and breathed until the shaking slowed. He told himself this would blow over, that there would be a settlement, a transfer, another gym with another set of rules he could bend. He didn't know the ground had already been cut away beneath him. Vincent spent the afternoon in motion. Meetings, calls, confirmations. He didn't enjoy this part. He didn't savor the unraveling. He focused on precision, on making sure the truth landed where it would stick. He drove past the school once more, just to see. Emily stood near the fence with two other girls. They were talking, laughing, not the sharp kind, the easy kind. When Daniel's name was mentioned somewhere behind them, the laughter didn't die. It moved on, as if he no longer controlled the air. Vincent felt a small, steadying warmth in his chest. Not pride, relief, but it didn't last. That evening, Eddie called. He's pushing back. Vincent leaned against his office window. How? He filed a formal complaint, Eddie said. Claims he's being targeted, says the girl is lying. Vincent closed his eyes. The restraint he'd practiced tightened again. Does he have anything? Just his word, Eddie said. But he's angry and scared. Vincent thought of the way Daniel had leaned toward Emily, of the way power curdled when it was challenged. Keep eyes on him, Vincent said, quietly. That night, Daniel showed up at a school board member's house unannounced. He rang the bell twice, pacing. When the door opened, he launched into explanations. How this was all a misunderstanding, how kids exaggerated, how careers were being ruined over nothing. The board member listened, arms crossed. When Daniel finished, breathless, the man sighed. Daniel, he said, why didn't you tell me about the old complaints? Daniel froze. What complaints? The ones from your previous schools, the man said. The emails, the witnesses. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. Those were nothing. They don't look like nothing, the man said. You should go. Daniel drove home in a haze. He sat in his apartment with the lights off, replaying every word he'd ever said, every laugh he'd chased. He felt hunted, not by violence, but by memory. Across the city, Vincent sat alone and finally allowed himself to feel tired. This wasn't victory. This was work. Necessary, draining work. He poured a glass of water and stared at his reflection. He wondered what Emily would think if she knew who he really was, what he'd done to earn his power. He wondered if protection counted if it came from a man with blood on his past. His phone buzzed with a message from Eddie. Tomorrow, the district announces a suspension. Vincent exhaled slowly. Tomorrow would be another step, not the end. He knew better than to think men like Daniel fell easily. Pride clung hard, and when pride cracked, it sometimes lashed out. Vincent turned off the light and let the city glow without him. Somewhere a child slept without knowing the danger hadn't fully passed yet, and somewhere else a man stared at his ceiling, realizing that the past he'd buried had learned how to knock. The announcement came just after lunch, delivered in a tone meant to sound calm, but carrying the weight of consequence. Daniel Rusk was suspended pending a full investigation. Effective immediately. Access to campus revoked. Students to be reassigned. The words echoed through the school faster than any bell ever had. Teachers whispered in doorways. Parents checked their phones with furrowed brows. Kids sensed something had shifted, even if they didn't yet have the language for it. Power had moved. Authority had cracked. Emily heard the news from another student before an adult said anything. She was sitting at her desk, tracing the edge of a notebook with her fingers, when a girl leaned in and whispered, wide-eyed, "He's gone." Emily didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just closed her notebook slowly, like someone finishing a chapter they hadn't chosen to read. Vincent stood across the street in his usual place, watching the doors. He saw Daniel's car in the staff lot, untouched. He saw administrators moving with urgency, clipboards in hand. He saw the subtle relief on faces that had learned to live with discomfort and call it normal. This was supposed to feel like relief. Instead, Vincent felt a tightening in his chest, because justice, he had learned, was rarely clean. It came with noise, with backlash, with people who resented the mirror being held up, and Daniel Rusk was not done. That afternoon, Emily stayed late for an art club session. It was quieter than recess, safer, or so everyone thought. Vincent had just pulled away when his phone rang. Eddie's voice was sharp. "He's there." Vincent's grip tightened. "Where?" "Near the school. Back entrance. He's not supposed to be." Vincent was already turning the wheel. "Call it in." "They already are," Eddie said. "But you know how long that takes." Vincent knew. He also knew Daniel's pattern. When power slipped, he reached for control anywhere he could still feel it. Vincent arrived just in time to see Daniel standing by the fence, jaw clenched, eyes scanning. The man looked smaller without his whistle, without the costume of authority, but the anger in his face was raw. Emily stepped out of the side door with a few other kids. She froze when she saw him. Daniel's eyes locked onto her. "You did this," he said, loud enough to carry. "You and your stories." A teacher shouted for security. Kids scattered. Emily didn't move. Vincent was out of the car in seconds, crossing the street with measured steps. He didn't run, he didn't shout, he didn't touch Daniel. He just stood between him and the girl. Daniel turned, startled. "Who the hell are you?" Vincent met his gaze. Calm, unflinching. "Someone who doesn't laugh at children." Daniel scoffed, but his eyes flickered. "You think you're better than me?" "I think you're finished," Vincent said. Daniel's face twisted. "You ruined my life." Vincent's voice dropped. "No. You did. Over years, one joke at a time." Security arrived, then police. Daniel protested, loud and indignant, as he was escorted away. He never took his eyes off Vincent, like he was trying to memorize the shape of the man who'd taken everything. Emily's knees buckled once Daniel was gone. A teacher caught her just in time. Vincent stayed back. He didn't approach her. Not yet. This moment wasn't his. That night, the story broke beyond the school. Local news, parent groups, formal statements. The phrase systemic failure appeared in headlines. Daniel's name became public. Vincent watched it all from his office. The city spread out beneath him. Eddie stood nearby, arms crossed. "You could have ended him faster," Eddie said quietly. Vincent nodded. "I know." "You chose not to." "Yes." Eddie studied him. "Why?" Vincent thought of Emily's voice. "Don't make it worse." "Because this way," Vincent said, "he has to live with it." There was a knock at the door. Emily's mother stood there, exhausted eyes, hands clenched together. She looked smaller than Vincent had imagined. Not weak, just worn thin. "I was told you wanted to see me," she said. Vincent gestured to a chair but didn't sit. "I wanted to make sure your daughter is safe." Her eyes filled despite herself. "She is. For the first time in a long time." She hesitated. "They told me you helped." Vincent chose his words carefully. "I made calls." "Why?" she asked. You didn't know us. Vincent swallowed. I knew what it was like to be alone in a place where no one stopped the hurting. She nodded slowly. Emily asked about you. Vincent's breath caught. What did she ask? She asked if you were real, her mother said, or if you were just something people imagine when they finally feel protected. Vincent looked down at his hands. Tell her I'm just a man. Her mother stood. Whatever you are. Thank you. After she left, Vincent sat alone in the quiet. The victory everyone else felt didn't sit easily with him. He knew what came next. Depositions, trials, arguments about intent and tone. Justice took time, and it took something else too. Before we continue, tell me in the comments what you think of this story so far, and what you would do in his place. Don't leave the video because what comes next will give you chills. The investigation moved fast now. Witnesses spoke. Former students came forward. Patterns became undeniable. Daniel Rusk lost more than his job. He lost his license, his reputation, his ability to hide behind humor. But even as consequences stacked up, Vincent felt the familiar pull of doubt. Had he done enough? Had he crossed a line by using influence, even for something right? He drove one last time past the school. Emily was on the playground laughing as she kicked a ball toward a friend. She missed the catch. The ball rolled away. She chased it, one-handed, unashamed. Vincent sat there longer than necessary, watching a future unfold that didn't need him anymore. That was the cost, and it was worth paying. The investigation did not unfold in a single dramatic moment. It spread instead, slow and relentless, like light filling a room no one had wanted to see clearly. Statements were taken, emails resurfaced. Old complaints, once buried under polite language and administrative fatigue, were reread with different eyes. Daniel Rusk stopped being a rumor and became a case. Vincent followed the process from a distance. He did not attend meetings or sit in courtrooms. He understood how fragile legitimacy could be when a man like him stood too close to it. This wasn't his stage. His role had been to open a door. Now others had to walk through it. Still, he watched. Former students came forward first. Teenagers now, some already in college, others working jobs that paid the bills, but not the past. They spoke about sarcasm that cut too deep, jokes that lingered long after the bell rang, a constant sense of being singled out and laughed at for things they couldn't change. Then parents spoke, voices shaking at first, then steadier, regret threaded through every sentence. They talked about doubts they'd swallowed, about choosing peace over confrontation because the system felt too big, too slow, too uninterested. Vincent listened to the recordings Eddie sent him late at night, sitting alone with the city humming outside his windows. Each voice carried weight. Each one landed somewhere in him that he didn't have words for. This was power, he realized. Not fear, not money. Truth that refused to stay quiet. Daniel tried to fight it. He hired a lawyer, claimed misinterpretation, said his humor had been misunderstood, that he was old-fashioned, that kids today were fragile. That cancel culture had come for him. None of it held. Because patterns don't argue, they simply exist. The district issued a formal apology, not just to Emily, but to families who had been dismissed for years. Training programs were announced. Oversight committees formed. It all sounded very official, very late. Emily's mother attended one of the meetings. She sat in the back, hands folded, listening as adults spoke carefully about accountability. When she came home, she found Emily in her room drawing. "What are you making?" her mother asked. Emily held up the page. It was a playground, bright colors, kids running, and in the corner, a small figure standing tall with one arm raised, not in defense, but in greeting. "They asked if I wanted to talk," Emily said. Her mother's chest tightened. "And?" Emily shrugged. "I said no. Not yet." That answer made its way back to Vincent through Eddie. Vincent nodded when he heard it. He understood timing, understood that some things needed to settle before they could be spoken aloud. Daniel's lawyer requested mediation, then confidentiality, then mercy. None came. The final decision arrived on a quiet Thursday morning. Daniel Rusk's teaching license was permanently revoked. His name was added to a registry that ensured he would never work with children again. The district's statement was clear, careful, and devastating. Vincent read it once, then again. He didn't feel triumph. He felt something closer to exhaustion. like finishing a long climb and realizing the air at the top was thinner than expected. That afternoon, Vincent did something he hadn't planned on doing. He went to the school, not to watch from across the street, not to stay hidden. He parked, stepped out, and walked toward the building like any other adult. The principal recognized him immediately. She'd seen his name attached to too many phone calls, too many polite inquiries that carried unmistakable weight. "Mr. Marlowe," she said carefully, "how can I help you?" "I'm not here for trouble," Vincent said. "I just wanted to see how things are." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Walk with me." They passed classrooms where kids bent over notebooks, where teachers spoke with patience they'd learned the hard way. The school felt lighter, not perfect, but breathing. They stopped near the playground. Recess was in full swing. Emily was there, kicking the ball back and forth with two other kids. She stumbled once, laughed, recovered. No one stared. She saw Vincent. This time she didn't hesitate. She jogged over, cheeks flushed, hair escaping its tie. "You came," she said. Vincent knelt to her level. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." She nodded. "He's not coming back." "No," Vincent said. "He's not." She looked at him, serious now. "Did you do it?" Vincent considered the question. "I helped." She thought about that. "My mum says you're a powerful man." Vincent smiled faintly. "Your mum is very kind." Emily tilted her head. "You didn't yell at him?" "No." "You didn't scare him?" Vincent paused. "I think I did. Just not the way he expected." She seemed satisfied. "That's better." A whistle blew. A different teacher. A gentler sound. Emily took a step back. "Are you leaving?" "Yes." "Okay," she said. Then, after a beat, "Thank you." Vincent felt the words settle into him, heavy and warm. "You're welcome." As he walked back to his car, Vincent felt something loosen that he hadn't realized he'd been holding for decades. Not guilt, not anger. A question. Who was he if he didn't solve problems the old way? That night, Vincent made arrangements. Quiet ones. He began stepping back from parts of his operation that no longer fit the man he was becoming. He handed responsibility to others, drew lines he hadn't drawn before. Change didn't come with applause. It came with unease. Eddie noticed. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," Vincent said honestly, "but I'm sure about why." The city outside kept moving. Deals were made. Power shifted. But somewhere beneath it all, a child slept without fear of laughter following her into dreams. That was enough. For now. Daniel Rusk did not disappear quietly. For weeks after the decision, his name floated through the city like a bad smell that refused to clear. Parents argued online. Comment sections burned with half-truths and anger. Some called the punishment excessive. Others said it was long overdue. Daniel gave a short interview from the steps of his apartment building, face drawn, voice sharp, insisting he had been misunderstood, framed by powerful interests. Vincent watched the clip once. He didn't flinch. He didn't respond. He knew something Daniel still hadn't learned. When the truth is solid, noise doesn't crack it. The real reckoning didn't come from headlines. It came quietly, where reputation actually lived. Job applications went unanswered. Old friends stopped returning calls. The bar where Daniel used to drink went silent when he walked in. The bartender suddenly busy, the regulars suddenly distant. Parents he passed on the street pulled their children closer without realizing they were doing it. Daniel felt it everywhere. The way eyes slid away, the way conversations ended when he entered a room. He was no longer a man with authority. He was a warning. Across town, Emily stood in front of her class holding a piece of paper that trembled just slightly in her hand. The assignment was simple. Read a paragraph aloud, something she would have avoided months ago. The new teacher smiled gently. "Take your time." Emily nodded. She took a breath, and she read. Her voice wavered once, then steadied. The room stayed quiet. Not the tense quiet of waiting for a mistake, but the respectful quiet of listening. When she finished, there was no laughter, just a few soft claps, starting with the teacher. Emily sat down, heart pounding, face warm. For the first time, she didn't feel like she'd survived something. She felt like she'd done something. Vincent heard about it later that evening, sitting in his office with the lights dimmed low. Eddie relayed the story with a small smile he didn't bother hiding. "She's different," Eddie said. "Stronger." Vincent nodded. She always was. The difference now was that the world had finally moved out of her way. Vincent's own world, however, was shifting in less visible ways. Stepping back from certain operations had consequences. Not everyone approved. Some men who had once followed his lead now questioned it. Others tested boundaries, curious whether the old Vincent was still there. He handled those moments without spectacle. A conversation here, a quiet warning there. He didn't need fear to fill rooms anymore. Respect, he was learning, could stand on its own. One night, as Vincent prepared to leave his office, Eddie stopped him at the door. "There's something you should know," Eddie said. Vincent turned. "What is it?" "Daniel tried to file a civil suit," Eddie said, "against the district, against anonymous parties." And it went nowhere," Eddie said. "No lawyer would touch it." Vincent absorbed that, then nodded. "Good." Eddie hesitated. "He also asked about you." Vincent's expression didn't change. "And?" "He wanted to know your name." Vincent considered this. For years, his name had opened doors and ended conversations. It had been something people whispered like a threat. "Did you tell him?" Vincent asked. "No." Vincent shook his head slowly. It wouldn't help him. Names had power only when they were feared. Daniel didn't need another enemy. He needed to sit with what he'd done, stripped of excuses. A few days later, Vincent received a handwritten letter. No return address. Plain envelope. Inside, the handwriting was careful, uneven. It was from Emily. She wrote about art class, about her mom working less overtime now that stress wasn't eating every night, about a friend who had learned how to tie her shoes one-handed because Emily had shown her how. At the end, she wrote, "I don't know what your job is, but I think you protect people. That's a good job." Vincent read the letter twice, then a third time. Something inside him shifted, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough that he sat down and stayed there longer than he meant to. He realized then that this was the real ending for Daniel Rusk. Not the loss of his career, not public shame. Being replaced by teachers who paid attention, by classrooms where silence didn't mean fear, by a girl who no longer thought survival was the same as living. Vincent folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer, among documents that mattered more than money ever had. That night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment, television flickering without sound. He stared at his phone, scrolling through contacts that no longer felt real. He thought about the girl, about the fence, about the man who had stood between them without raising his voice. For the first time, there was no one left to blame. Across the city, Vincent stood on his balcony, watching lights turn off one by one. He thought about legacy, not the one written in rumors, but the one written in people who slept easier because someone had said no on their behalf. His name, once tied to fear, had rewritten itself quietly, and that, he understood now, was the truest kind of power. Vincent Marlowe left the city the way he did most things, without ceremony. No farewell dinner, no speech to the men who'd once watched his every move like it was a weather forecast, no dramatic disappearance that begged to be chased. He simply started folding pieces of his life into smaller boxes, one quiet decision at a time, until what remained could fit in the trunk of a black sedan and a single locked suitcase. Eddie noticed first. Not because Vincent announced it, but because Vincent stopped scheduling certain meetings, stopped approving certain deals, stopped treating every conflict like it had to be won. "You're really going," Eddie said one morning, leaning against the office doorframe. Vincent looked up from the desk. The skyline behind him was pale and clean, the kind of morning that made the world look innocent from far away. "Yes." Eddie's face tightened. "To where?" "Somewhere nobody knows my name," Vincent said. Then, after a beat, "Somewhere I can decide who I am without my past deciding first." Eddie didn't like it, but he understood it. That was why he'd stayed all these years, because Vincent, for all his reputation, always had a code. The code had just changed shape. "There are people who will see this as weakness," Eddie warned. Vincent nodded. Let them. He wasn't naive. He knew stepping away created a vacuum. Vacuums got filled, but he had planned for that too. He'd chosen who would take over the parts of the operation that could be contained, minimized, kept from spilling into chaos. He'd made sure debts were settled, loose ends tied, the kind of preparation that didn't earn gratitude, but prevented disasters. When he finally locked his office for the last time, he stood for a moment with his hand on the handle. He thought of all the conversations that had happened inside those walls. Promises, threats, betrayals, bargains made with calm voices and cold eyes. Then he walked away. Before he left the city, he drove past Hawthorne Elementary one last time. He didn't park across the street this time. He pulled into the small visitor lot like any other adult. For a moment, he considered not going in. It felt too close to needing something, too close to asking for permission to feel good about himself. But he remembered Emily's words. That's better. Better meant facing things directly, not hiding behind distance. He walked to the front office. The receptionist looked up, surprised, then cautious. Vincent gave a small nod, not demanding, not intimidating. "I'd like to speak to Ms. Carter," he said. "If she's here." The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone. "She's in a meeting," she said quietly. "But I can see if she can step out." A minute later, Emily's mother appeared. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw him, then softened into something like understanding. She looked healthier than the last time he'd seen her, still tired, but less haunted. "Mr. Marlowe," she said. "Vincent," he corrected gently. She nodded. "Vincent." He didn't waste time. "I'm leaving town," he said. Her expression shifted. Surprise first, then a kind of cautious relief, as if she'd worried his presence might draw trouble to her daughter. "I wanted to say goodbye," Vincent continued. "And to make sure you have what you need." She stared at him, trying to decide what you need meant coming from a man like him. Vincent reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. He held it out without pushing it into her hands. "It's not charity," he said. "It's a clean start. For tutoring, for whatever helps her feel safe and strong. No strings." Emily's mother's throat tightened. "We can't." "You can," Vincent said softly. "Not because you owe me, because she deserves it." She took the envelope with careful hands like it might break. "Emily will want to see you." Vincent's chest tightened. "Is she here?" "She's in class," her mother said. "But I can ask her teacher." Vincent shook his head. "No," he said. "Don't pull her out. Let her be a kid. Let her have normal." Emily's mother blinked back tears. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. Vincent almost smiled. "Neither am I." As he turned to leave, a small voice floated down the hallway. "Vincent?" He froze. Emily stood at the corner, backpack on, hair slightly messy, holding a sketchbook against her chest. She had clearly been walking by at the exact wrong time to be protected from goodbyes. Her teacher stood behind her, unsure whether to intervene. Vincent knelt slowly, meeting her eyes the same way he had on the street. "Hi, Emily." She walked closer, gaze fixed on his face like she wanted to memorize it. "Are you going away?" "Yes," he said. "Because of him?" she asked. Vincent shook his head. "Because of me." Emily frowned, not liking vague answers. "Did I make you leave?" "No," Vincent said firmly. "You didn't make anything bad happen. You made something good happen." She absorbed that, then looked down at her sketchbook. "I drew you," she said, voice smaller now. Vincent's breath caught. "Can I see?" Emily opened the sketchbook to a page where she'd drawn the schoolyard fence. A little girl with one arm stood near it, and on the other side a tall figure stood with his hands in his pockets. Not scary, not angry, just there. Above the figure she'd written 2 words in uneven letters. "Stayed." Vincent stared at the drawing longer than he meant to. His eyes burned, and he hated that they did, but he didn't hide it. "I like it," he said quietly. "It's the best picture anyone's ever made of me." Emily watched him with the same serious focus she'd had that first day. "Are you good?" she asked suddenly. The question hit him harder than any threat ever had. Vincent didn't lie. Not to her. "I'm trying," he said. Emily nodded once, as if that was the only answer she needed. Then she stepped forward and hugged him. It was quick, tight and fearless. Vincent didn't move for a second. Then he placed one hand gently on her shoulder, careful, respectful, and let himself accept it. When she pulled back, she looked up at him. "Don't forget me," she said. Vincent swallowed. "I won't." Emily's mother was crying openly now, one hand over her mouth. The teacher wiped at her own eyes and turned away, pretending she hadn't seen anything. Vincent stood. He looked at Emily one last time. "Keep saying no," he told her. "It's a powerful word." Emily smiled, small and bright. "Okay." Vincent left the school and got into his car. For a moment, he just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the building. He felt something unfamiliar. Not guilt, not anger, not hunger for control. Peace. He drove out of the city as the afternoon light softened. Traffic thinned. Buildings gave way to open roads and quiet stretches of sky. With every mile, the old Vincent, the man made of fear and consequence, grew smaller in the rearview mirror. He didn't pretend redemption erased the past. He didn't pretend he could undo what he'd done. But he had done one thing right. He had stood between cruelty and a child. And that child had learned she could stand too. What did you think of the story? Subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who will also be moved today.